It's working.
It's preparing.
Yeah.
We good to go?
Not yet. I'm just waiting to see it pop up.
Okay.
There's always that delay. It's not live on YouTube yet.
One of our guests is confirming that we're live on YouTube. Thank you, Dylan. So over to you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, in that case, I would like to welcome members and any members of the public who are watching this on YouTube to the Northamptonshire Shadow Overview and Scrutiny Committee meeting. Some of you may be aware we've had some technical issues. This meeting was due to start at 7 o'clock, but we couldn't get live on YouTube until now, about just after 6:45. So we are now going to go ahead with the meeting. So without any further ado, first item on the agenda, apologies for non-attendance. Paul?
Just apologies from Councillor Peter McEwen, Chair.
Okay, and the next item then, of course, is the minutes of the last meeting, which were held on the 6th of October. I'd like to check those for accuracy, if everybody's happy, and if we are happy to agree those as a correct record, if we could have a proposer and seconder, that would be useful.
Well, I'll propose. You need to move
Yeah,
on.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Everybody agreed? Yep. Okay. In the only thing I would like to raise from the minutes on, oh crikey, I've lost my page now, all this messing around, but there was an item we discussed, the highways issue that didn't go to cabinet, item 7, page 10 of our agendas, and the interim head of paid service confirmed that she would inquire into why that didn't happen and respond to members of this committee. As yet, we haven't had a response for that. Is Liz Elliott with us?
I am, Chair. I did inquire as to why it didn't come forward. It was because it was put on the forward plan as something that was potentially coming forward, but then the report was not needed at the last minute, and so was pulled. Because it was an issue that was an NCC contract negotiation, it wasn't felt that it was needed to come forward at this time to the shadow.
Item 3, today's meeting then, any declarations of interest from members? No, can't see anybody raising their blue hand or waving at me. That then brings us to item 4, questions and notifications of requests to address the meeting. Paul, we have had a question and some members of the public who wish to speak, is that right?
That's correct, Chair. And when we get to the item on the draft blueprint, we have 4 speakers to call, followed by a question, and we have a written response to the question, so we can give that back. And just to remind the 4 speakers that you have a maximum of 3 minutes each. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll pass that over.
Sorry, Councillor Hakewell wishes to come in.
Jim.
Mine was just a quick real thanks to Paul and the team that on the agenda there's a very clear table telling people when they need to get questions in. And I know I whinged about it, but I'd just like to express my thanks because it just makes it more transparent. Thank you, Chairman.
Yep, I remember you raising it, and it's good that that's been picked up. Item 5 today, Chair's announcements. I have none, I don't think, that won't pop up later, perhaps. So that brings us to the substantive items on the agenda. Item 6 is the adult services update, but because members of the public are here to speak on item 7, I'm going to bring that forward, the draft blueprint for the Shadow Authority. Paul, do you want to ask the speakers?
The first speaker, Chair, is Councillor Anne Lee, who wishes to address the meeting.
Anne.
Thank you, councillors. Right, yes, I wanted to speak about this because I looked through this blueprint and I am horrified by several aspects of this blueprint. One is that in the North draft blueprint, planning and the environment are mentioned in one breath I'm looking on page 13 of the blueprint, page 30 of the agenda pack, where you will see on the right planning and environment. Now, we all know that planning and the environment are traveling in opposite directions at the moment. The rules on planning are becoming far more lax. The localism element is being taken out of it. Whereas we've got with the environment is really giving cause of concern, and no climate change is mentioned at all in the North draft blueprint, whereas the West blueprint does mention climate change, and it is part of their blueprint that they will provide the resources to to spend time on climate change. How is that possible when at the moment it is it's really one of the most crucial points that we need to concern ourselves with, that we need to look into. So it should be part of our DNA, it should be part of our blueprints. Can I also mention that I'm concerned about, I'm not afraid to say it, the numerous spelling errors. I've sent several lists and they were never acknowledged. But it's terrible. I mean, school children may do projects on this blueprint, Chair. I mean, do you really want to spell tomorrow with 2 M's on the penultimate page in the headline? There's so many errors, grammatical errors. I wonder how many people have actually read this. I hope that an amended version will be made available next week, and that the public will never see this version of it. But as I said, if planning and environment are under the same header, Chair, I hope that we build in safeguards to make sure that the environment is taken care of and that these conflicting interests are managed in an appropriate way. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Anne. Obviously, when we've heard from the other 3 public speakers, there'll be an opportunity for members of this committee to debate what you've discussed. And I would also ask Paul Helsby, perhaps, and Anna Earnshaw, who are going to present this report in due course, to consider the things that you and the other speakers are about to say. Paul.
Okay, our next speaker is Ms. Alison Holland, who I think is with us.
Hello. Hello, yes.
Hello, Alison. Go ahead, please.
Hello. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm speaking as a member of the local community, but also as someone who, for the last 17 years, has worked with local authorities across the UK, as well as many local schools, to promote safe, active, sustainable everyday travel. With this blueprint, I feel there are some really important points to raise, which should be at the core of our new unitary. First of all, transport is very much a cross-sector issue, and there needs to be a mechanism for connecting the different functions. Secondly, sustainability needs to feature much more strongly, and I have 2 suggestions for this. So first, transport. This is within regulatory services, rather buried, I would say, considering its impact on all of our lives every day. For example, road safety as a function is not even mentioned, despite the fact that 288 people were killed or seriously injured on our county's roads last year. Transport is the greatest source of CO2 emissions in the UK. If we want to address climate change, we need to address transport. Air quality. Here in Kettering, the biggest cause of poor air quality is from motor vehicles, with more than 200 deaths in the county attributed to air pollution in 2017. Helping us to be less car dependent, to be able to safely walk and cycle more, not just sporty cyclists, but people of all ages and abilities who wish to have a good public transport network. All these things improve access to work and training opportunities, physical health, social cohesion, mental well-being, and make our area much more attractive for all. So secondly, sustainability is supposed to be at the heart of the new unitary. This is wonderful to have in a vision, but can only be realised if it is put in right from the start, not just as a department, but with a practical framework that reaches across the organisation and supports and enables all staff to put into practice. This can be developed from the existing United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, or UN SDGs. which provide key targets within the 17 widely accepted sustainability goals, such as climate, gender equality, and health and well-being, which includes reducing road casualties. So, in summary, 3 requests. First, build into this blueprint a way of connecting sustainable transport issues across the portfolios. Second, create a core function which is based on the UN SDG goals in order to ensure and enable the achievement of these goals across the organisation. And thirdly, this is a personal one. If you aren't already aware of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, please Google and read up on them. Your blueprint needs you to know them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Paul?
Okay, I'd like to invite Dylan to the meeting. Chair?
Hello.
With your permission.
Good evening, Shadow Councillors and Officers. I'm here to express my concerns on this North Northamptonshire unitary blueprint. I believe, as we all should, the local environment and climate change is a vitally important issue for all of us, especially local authorities like yourselves. The fact that there is no mention of safeguarding the commitment from the individual councils on local environment and no mention of the declaration of a climate emergency by both Kettering Borough and Corby Borough Council is disappointing and shameful. As a new body, North Northampton Council has a prime opportunity to safeguard and protect our precious environment from the get-go, and this report misses out on that vital opportunity. As you're all elected councillors, you know how important the environment and green spaces are to your constituents, as speaking as one of them, and the fact that this report makes absolutely no mention of them is worrying for the future of environmental policy in North Northamptonshire. You need to be focusing on this topic, especially given the huge capacity for outrage shown by the Save Weekly Hall Wood Group in Kettering. So I hope you can put in writing your commitment to safeguarding of green spaces and your commitment to tackling the climate emergency here in North Northamptonshire. Thank you very much and have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Dylan. Paul, the last speaker.
We've got a questioner as well, of course. So I'd like to invite Nina to the meeting, who's here. Chair.
Hello. Sorry.
Please go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Nina Lloyd. I'm 16 and I would like to talk to you tonight about how you are designing and shaping this new Northamptonshire Council and the impact of what you decide could all have for not just mine but other future generations as well. I was born in 2003, and those of you born in 1973, 63 and 53 didn't have to worry about there being a habitable world for you to live in 50 years later, but we do. In all that time, governments at both national and local levels haven't done anything of worth to seriously address climate change. In 2007, the Lyons Inquiry set out the fundamental role of local governments to be the primary place shaper of their local communities. If you're struggling for ideas, take note of what Greater Manchester are doing with their clean air strategy of reducing carbon emissions by not allowing cars in the city centre and decommissioning roads. Or if the Dutch have done, put in an investment into cycle infrastructure that links the whole of the county as opposed to new roads in order to reduce the need for cars. So on behalf of the people of tomorrow, I ask that you create this new council, as you create this new council, please do not do as its predecessors did, as we now need so much more than they have ever offered. Please consider and embed the threats of climate change into everything you do in order to create a council that shapes my area around my generation's future needs. Give us some chance of the quality of life in which you, your families and friends have indulged, a luxury that is no longer offered to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nina, and to yourself and all the public speakers, thank you for coming along. I would say that this committee is not a sort of decision-making body. We won't get to say what the final blueprint is actually like, but we do have the opportunity, following our debate that we're about to have, to pass on any suggestions, comments or recommendations to the council's leadership, to the executive, and I'm quite happy for, Liz wants to come in, I'm quite happy for you guys to stay for the remainder of the debate of this item rather than kick you out and try to get you to find it on YouTube, although obviously the debate and discussion will be just between members of the council. Liz Elliott.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to reassure the speakers that we are considering climate change, and I've asked for a new report template to be developed for North Northamptonshire Council, which has in every report the issues affecting climate and environment as a risk assessment as part of that report. So we are embedding in that in every decision, so that future councillors in the new council can see the climate effect and the environmental effect on any decision that they are making.
Okay, thank you. That's good to hear. Although, of course, we still have the opportunity to make any comment about the lack of discussion of it in this document, should we wish to. Paul, we have a written question now.
Well, we do. We have the questioner online, and I'll ask Miss Buckingham if she wants to ask a question, or does she want me to ask the question for her and give her the response?
Lynn, are you with us? Can you? You're muted at the moment. Were you able to hear that?
Lynn, so I do know Lynn. So
it might be possible that she didn't come back in 15 minutes ago. I don't know.
Right. Okay. Well, she's on screen, but she's blocked. If it's okay, Chair, I'll read out her question and provide the answer, if that's okay.
Please.
Okay. On page 38, it discusses the blueprint for the strategic housing function, i.e. housing options, homelessness, housing need and supply, but does not discuss the landlord/tenant relationship and whether these will be needed to be harmonised or transferred, or if indeed it will be a lead management function and what the practicalities of that will be. As a tenant of one of the sovereign councils, I know that when that council ceases to be, so will my tenancy. What is also not clear is if the authority would have to adhere to certain statutory requirements, particularly relating to tenant consultation, and follow the process set out in the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government Housing Transfer Manual, leading to the grant of consent by the Secretary of State, or whether other processes would take precedence. So the response, Chair, and I thank my colleague John at Kettering Borough Council for this. The council housing stock, which is currently owned by Kettering Borough Council and Corby Borough Council, will transfer to North Northamptonshire Council in April 2021, when the new council assumes the functions of Kettering and Corby. North Northamptonshire will therefore be a stock holding authority as well as a strategic housing authority, and it will be landlord to more than, I think it's 8,000 tenants. As North Northamptonshire Council is the successor to two stock holding authorities that are being abolished, the provisions of the Housing Transfer Manual do not apply. They would have applied if there had been a proposal to transfer the stock to a different type of landlord, such as a housing association or a private company. Both Kettering and Corby do have a duty under Section 105 of the Housing Act 1985 to consult their tenants on significant changes to the management of their homes. Clearly, in this case, both authorities will need to consult their tenants during the period up to April 2021 on a range of practical issues relating to the transfer. These will include allocations and transfer policies, conditions of tenancy, and repairs policies, among others. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully that answers Lynn's question. And yeah, I don't imagine there will be any massive changes in the relationship with tenants in the near future, although obviously the medium to long-term future, that's a discussion for the new council, although I certainly hope that we will remain a stockholding council. Right, that brings us then on to the agenda item proper, as it were. I've got Paul Helsby and Anna Earnshaw, I believe, are here to present the report. So if I could throw the floor open to you, and then obviously following your comments, that will be open then to members to have a discussion about the blueprint and any suggestions, comments that we have that we wish to pass on to others.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you, members as well, and to members of the public. I'll try, if it's okay with you, Chair, to pick up a couple of the points that are mentioned in there in the overview that I give. So members are asked to note this report and the sort of draft blueprints that are being presented, obviously, tonight for the Northamptonshire Unitary Council, and how services are generally expected to be organised for day one. And also giving a key overview of some areas about how we expect to. Obviously, the report should be read in conjunction with the slide pack, which members will have seen. And also, we've asked members to note the progress that we've made in terms of how the services will be configured and some of the aspirations that have been set out in terms of the way services will feel and look and be presented in future. Obviously, work had started some time ago on these blueprints, and we were progressing extremely well when the COVID pandemic hit. And as a result of that situation, the programme and normal council services were obviously suspended. So it was agreed that given that delay and given the obvious and very important focus on COVID, that the programme would turn to a focus on being safe and legal and making sure that first and foremost, that services could transfer over to the new authorities safely and functioning without any disruption to customers. That's quite important to note because obviously some of the work that had been happening about the more aspirational and transformational parts of our thinking were unable to progress at that time, as obviously our first focus was making sure that we could get services, policies and things working for that day one situation. However, the shadow executive, agreed that wherever possible, we should seek still to implement transformation where it was safe and legal to do so. And that is the so-called plus part of this plan. And also that we should make sure that where possible, we would still split NCC services so that staff would move over to the two new authorities and to the new footprints from day one. Since then, we've been working obviously with chief executives and wider staff to look at then how we disaggregate those NCC services and how we'll bring them together with district and borough services to create a functioning council. And the draft blueprint is presented tonight to show you an overview of what is proposed. It is really important, and I think maybe just picking up some of the comments that have been made, to note this is not a structure chart. So this is not expected to be something that sets out exactly how the services will be structured or the management structures. And neither is it a policy document. Obviously the council's plan and the corporate plan and all those priorities of members will be something that will be developed between members. And this is purely looking at those services that are there today and how they might be connected together. And if I could just maybe pick up that one comment, Chair, with your permission. For example, when we talk about planning and environment on the North Blueprint, it is not designed to sort of talk particularly about environmental services and environmental sustainability as an area. It's simply saying that in that area, we've listed the functions of the council that deal with environmental health and some of the waste planning and those other kind of mineral planning type activities, as opposed to, say, that wider policy question. The work provides obviously foundations for the next stage of the process, and particularly is important for staff who then can see where they might transfer to on day one and how the services would be split. I would ask members to note as well that Adult Social Services does intend to split its services prior to vesting day, and that split will actually happen in a soft disaggregation during this year and is on target to happen before November 2020. And I know we've got a separate item on that where we can update members further should you be interested in. However, people have referred several times now to the service maps that are shown within the appendix. And obviously page 13 of the appendix shows the North Blueprint. Given the nature of services for NCC and the complexity of splitting those arrangements, it is important that we have had to look at every single function and how safe it is actually to split those services for day one. And whilst I accept that it's quite a busy slide and a busy picture with the various colours on there, what we've had to do is look at services in different ways in terms of NCC and how we might treat them, bearing in mind that our first and foremost aim in this is to make sure services remain safe and legal. So in the first instance, we have attempted to disaggregate NCC services wherever we can, and that is indicated on the key and shown in those purple colours that exist on that chart to show you all the services that we're hoping to split. We've also set out where some services will remain externally provided. And for those of you that can see that on your screens or in front of you, these are particularly the yellow boxes on the blueprint. And these are services, for example, LGSS law, where the county council currently buys in a service from an external body and will continue to do so, because to break them up now or to bring them in-house would be more expensive or might disrupt external income that the council receives for those services. So it is intended for day one that those services continue to be provided to both councils as an external service. We've also got a number of council services which will be hosted. And the key thing to note about hosted services is that they are temporary. So these are ones where, for some reason, we have decided that it is not safe to split them before day one. And that might be an operational thing. The obvious one, perhaps, to pull out for members would be schools admissions. During the school admission year, this will be a critical time for placements. And to try and break up that service and split the staff at that time wouldn't be helpful to parents or school children and puts at risk that process. Equally, there may be a contract that actually to split at this point would be more expensive for taxpayers. And so we haven't attempted to do that. And instead, these services will transfer over as hosted services led by one authority or the other and provided in the short term to the other authority, just until we can split them. And the final type of category is a lead authority. And these are services where we have agreed that one service will lead and host and manage that service and will provide it to the other council. And these are generally services that are back office and generally services where to disrupt them would cause significant issues in terms of services to council staff or indeed services to external customers. The most obvious ones to talk about are things like HR payroll transactions. And these are services that currently the County Council also shares and provides to both Cambridge County Council and Milton Keynes. And so to break them up and to split them could cause a disruption to the considerable income that comes in for those services and also to the services and staff within the new councils. So we've taken a pragmatic decision, seeking wherever possible to make sure we do split services, but if we can't, to make sure that as far as possible that happens for a temporary basis, that they're hosted, or indeed that there's a lead authority model where we can develop very strong SLAs between the two authorities. It's also assumed for all district and borough services that they will split naturally into their west and north counterparts, as you would expect. First and foremost, our aim and our aspiration with this blueprint is that members can feel confident that services will transfer smoothly. And next week, you'll be seeing further detailed information about each of the functions that you can see on that map and what will happen to it. Further information about the new systems and other things that will be put in place to support those new ways of working. But as we said, the programme has also considered the plus elements and therefore the more transformational elements. And within the pack, you can see that we've started to paint a picture of what place and people services might look like in the future, and how we can gain the opportunities of joining up district and borough services, for example, in the way that public health might interact in future with leisure services and health services and adult services, and how housing might be linked into that, and how also we make sure that our green places, leisure and other culture services link into planning in the way that members of the public and other members have mentioned tonight. So it's very much about taking the opportunity to do those things. We have outlined, as members have alluded to, and some of the members of the public have alluded to, some of the aspirations that we have for people services and place services. You'll hear more in the next item about adults particularly and how that is transforming. But these, again, are not intended to be policy statements. They're just outlining to members some of the thoughts and ideas we've had around how the services can change for day one, for the better, for stakeholders and for public, and also some of the opportunities we want to explore. And with climate change, whilst I accept, obviously, this is not a policy document, I'll draw members' attention to page 22 of the appendix that does talk about making sure we've got a sustainable and joined up infrastructure that responds and makes sure that we've got a resource efficient and connected area, and that it's a healthier area that people can live in, and that we can actually sustain and be able to cope with both economic and climate shocks in the future. Lastly, we've also laid out some of the digital or IT changes that we're expecting to take place. And there is significant investment that is taking place, and more detail will emerge on that next week when we talk about the ways that that will be different for members of the public, and also different for businesses. And I would encourage members, if you haven't seen it already, to look at the YouTube video that we recorded earlier on, which talks you a bit more through some of these details and the ways that we're going to be changing. So if it's okay with the chair and with members, I'll draw an end to the paper there and welcome any questions, rather than talk you through obviously what is quite a detailed presentation designed to inform this discussion and the next stage of the design. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Paul, you're presumably happy then just to chip in with any questions, or did you have anything?
Yeah, absolutely, Chair. That's fine. Anna and I agreed that Anna was going to talk it through rather than make it a bit disjointed and keep handing over. We just thought it'd be easier for the public to follow the story.
I wasn't entirely clear how you were doing it. Okay, fine. Well, we'll throw it open to debate between councillors then, members of this committee. I take on board entirely Anna's comments that this is not a policy document. It's a sort of general outline of how things are seen in the future. And it was very interesting to hear about the hosted services that for the time being will sort of remain as they are. And it will, of course, be for the two unitaries to take their time and work out how they want to disaggregate or aggregate them in the future. Okay, members, any comments? Remember, what we're trying to do now is we're being asked to note this document, but we do have the opportunity, if we want to pass on any suggestions, any comments or otherwise to the executive. Whether they choose to listen to us, it's entirely up to them, but this is your opportunity to say anything that you'd like to say. Nobody? Okay, I've got Jim.
Mick, the hands are raised.
The hands are raised.
People are raising the hands on the chat, sort of the participants.
Yeah, I can't see that. Well, I've got Jim Hakewell and Ash Davis, and then perhaps Paul, you could help me out with who hands going.
Yeah,
okay. Jim.
Sorry you can't see it. I feel a bit guilty now because other people have got their blue hands up earlier. Just, well, a number of issues. 5.2 on, it's quite complex, isn't it? 5.2 on climate change. And I think Liz might have updated this, but at KBC, when we moved the climate emergency, we had a specific agenda item at the end of every agenda report, climate change. Liz may have updated that, although it's not in the report, I don't think, on that one. A general view, maybe not relevant to today, but we heard from Alison Holland, and it always strikes me that there are people with immense knowledge that I hope in Scrutiny, even in this grouping, but certainly in the unitaries, will have a clear space for people to be co-opted, even for periods of time, to give us advice on things like cycling and all the other issues, climate change and so on. So I hope that opportunity will be there. Alison, Chairman, told us about a link. Could our officer colleagues get in touch with Alison and maybe have the UN link on climate change circulated? Because I, for one, don't particularly have that. Lynn talked about council housing, and forgive me if I missed some of it, and I think she's not there now. The response was that both Corby and Kettering will liaise with their tenants in the council housing because it's a major change. What I haven't seen, and I bring it up at this point, although it's forward plan, is anything in the forward plan where the results of consultation between Corby, Kettering and its tenants, and I'm a bit confused as to how Silver Service, which includes Wellingborough, would work, how that comes back to you and our committee, because clearly if there are consultations going out, we need to understand what people are saying, even though those consultations are not part of our own, if you like, remit. Page 15, I'm hoping I've got the right report here, 5.2. It just says all those considered the opportunities to transform, changes being made. The last part of it says, great places to grow up, get on and grow old. Well, I'm clearly in the growing old level, but then there were, I don't think the young lady is still here who talked about being 16 and going on. That again reinforces climate change. And I think you'll be pleased to know on this item, 25, slide number 25. Sorry, it's so complicated, isn't it, to bring all this up. Item number 25, or page 25, is North Portfolios. Now, I see what some speakers said, which is highways, transport and environment and climate are showing in there. But I thought, Chairman, that we had the debate about there being a rural title, and Councillor David Jenny was going to hold that. Is this an old slide? Because I don't see the word rural on any of those blueprints.
First.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jim. You mentioned climate change. One of the public speakers earlier mentioned that Kettering and Corby had both passed climate emergency motions. I don't know the situation in Wellingborough and East Northants, but I can also say that the County Council itself has passed such a motion, so it should be embedded in all of our thinking. The point about the rural thing, sorry, Liz Elliott, can you reply to that? Didn't you respond last time Councillor Hakewell made a comment about that? So can we clarify exactly what that position is?
Yes, so it is under David Jenny's portfolio, but it is not on the face of the portfolio because we haven't put every single aspect of the portfolio in the title of it. But he is in contact and he's going to be speaking to NALC and very shortly. We're arranging a meeting for him, and he's going to be taking forward the rural issues mainly through engaging with the rural parishes, but also if there's anybody else that needed to contact him on a rural issue, he's quite willing to be involved in that.
Okay, so it's not in the title, but it is in his job.
Yeah.
Yes, it's not in the title, but it is in his job description, so to speak.
Okay.
For you, Chairman, that's absolutely impossible to think of in a rural county. I thought the word was going in and was going to be related to that. Not having rural on the face of a portfolio in Northamptonshire is despicable. It needs to be on the face of it, not hidden.
It could well be that unless anybody has any objections, that's one of the comments we pass forward to the executive for them to consider. Ash Davis, you were waiting, and then there are a few others, I gather.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, reflecting on what the speakers said tonight, plus obviously what Councillor Hakewell's just said, I think it seems like a sensible suggestion to do what we do at Kettering and embed the implications in each document. I find that useful sitting on planning and obviously other scrutiny committees as well. It just means that it's just seamless across the board. So any sort of learnings can be taken on board, but also what we're doing well to monitor performance. And clearly, just reflecting what we've done in Kettering in the last year, I really hope that we sort of bring a lot of these ideas, working with Corby with regard to wildflowers, with regard to pardon the weeds, we're saving the bees, things like that are really excellent ideas to enhance the local environment. That to me sets the scene for local instant ways, as demonstrated by Councillor Hakeweller, to bring this forward to unitary. Reflecting on the overall document, it's a quality document. I think we all are keen to see transformation, keen to see quality at the heart of everything, to improve the outcomes of each and every resident that live here, and to make it a better place, the best place really in the country to live, work and play. That should be our goal. And it's therefore good to see strong digital approach. I think data is a little bit boring, but it is our friend. We need to make sure that data is seamless, so people's records are shared when we merge, so people who come in at front end get a good smooth experience and are helped easier, rather than people getting lost in the system. That really shouldn't be excusable once we've transformed. But also measuring outcomes for people. I think data really is the best way to see what we're doing and how that's improving, people's opportunities, people's lives. So I think carry on with that, with good digital transformation, and obviously mindful of working from home. That's going to be far more commonplace, I think, post COVID. So obviously where we can help officers to work smart, work better, and work collaboratively with technology, that, you know, is a no-brainer for me. Reflecting on the point about council housing, I think it's, you know, it's absolutely vital that tenants are engaged, brought along, and really we need to make sure that what we offer is a quality offer, not just in terms of you know, existing council stock, you know, reducing voids, which has a net benefit on hopefully reducing homelessness, but of course I'd like to see more council houses, as we're seeing in Kettering, you know, any land that's under the council's ownership, you know, where we can, we really should be looking at how we deliver these schemes, you know, quality schemes, appropriate schemes, but housing, you know, nonetheless. Also, it's good to see reference made to inward investment, just so we're, you know, each and every part of funding that we can bid for improving infrastructure, improving, attracting jobs to the area, you know, and improving our area's profile, I think is a no-brainer. Let's carry on with that. But also, it's good to see reference to estate management. I think we really need to have a long-term strategy on revenue, if we can, maximising how we use our assets. To perhaps provide office space for local businesses, perhaps where it's redundant. So the first sort of answer perhaps isn't just to sell an asset, it's to see how can we maximise the inward revenue each year, and also then provide net benefits with that, and obviously get a view of what areas need perhaps work to make it more customer friendly, more staff friendly. Obviously, again, mindful of technology and how we you know, sort of link to that. So they're really my main points. Really, it's just keeping the ambition, keeping the quality, and just making sure that everything that we do is sort of, the impacts on each decision is I think the word I'm looking for is holistic, because obviously housing, you know, quality offer there helps reduce homelessness. You know, quality offer on infrastructure helps improve the environment. It's all these areas that help us to stand out and just allow us to have a good offer when we're bidding for funding. So yeah, lots of points to put forward to exec, but I'm, you know, overall positive, but obviously there's always room to improve. Thanks, Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. And just to clarify to non-Kettering members, Kettering Borough Council on every agenda item of every committee has a final item implications of the climate change, and that's what Jim and Ash were talking about. And I must admit, I think that is a good idea. That is something that the new unitary should take up. Paul Gold, can I ask for your help in?
There's a few. So next is Councillor Harrison, followed by Councillor Henley.
Okay, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to I'd like to thank the officers for this report. I will say it took me a very, very long time to get through it. One, because my eyesight's deteriorated quite badly in the last couple of years, and I found it almost impossible to read either on the computer screen or printed out as big as I could get it. I know it looks really nice when you have colourful charts, but it makes it really difficult to read. So just for future reference, for poor people like me who are struggling without eyesight, I really struggled. It took me a long time to read it and make sense of it. But having said all of that, which is a little whinge, it looks to me as if everything that needs to be there is going to be in place on day one, which is fantastic. And the speakers who came on today and councillors who've spoken before me have brought up some really interesting and useful points. But as you rightly say, this is not a policy document, and it certainly shouldn't be a policy document, because that is for the new elected authority next year to determine. However, I also very much appreciate the fact that we do need to take into account environmental issues, as well as equalities and health issues. My particular area of interest is public health and well-being. And all of those things all work together to create holistic policy making. And I was pleased to hear Councillor Davies mentioning the word holistic, because I think if every policy we make is looked at in the round with equalities, health, and the environmental impacts taken into account, we're going to be making good policies. So I'm really pleased to hear that environmental impact is going to be brought into that, as well as health and equalities. So I'd really like to see that being driven forward in the future. My final observation would be that some of the aspiration area of the document let's face it, it's a bit woolly. I mean, you know, we all want people to live in a great place, to grow up and so, you know, and grow old in a nice environment and so on and so forth. However, again, I appreciate that, you know, these are things that a policy is going to drive forward, and we're going to make those changes. And if I look ahead to a later item where we look at adult social care and the transformation there that's taking place, those are the kinds of things that are going to deliver on those aspirations when we have proper joined up policy making, where the person is at the centre of all of that decision making, and we come to an end of this the computer says no type decision making. So you know, I'm quite excited. I was quite worried previously about how all of these things were going to come together. I now feel a sense of excitement that we're pulling in the right direction, and that all of this is going to come together in the right way, particularly if we approach it from a very, very holistic, in the round policy making method. Thank you.
Thank you. And your use of the word holistic, I think, is one of the real opportunities. Having housing, for example, working alongside public health, or at least a lot closer to public health, is a real opportunity for the new council. We'll have to see how it works out. Adam.
Thank you, Chair. I also want to thank the speakers as well. It's always a bit disturbing to realise that I get burnt for being born in '73. I was a bit disappointed by, I attended the YouTube presentation this morning, and I really didn't feel that was the appropriate method for communicating with elected members, simply on the fact that it was sent out, it was a transmit rather than an opportunity to have a discussion. Then at the end of the meeting, they mentioned that there was a 102-page detailed document coming out, but there's no timeline on when that comes out. I know that the Shadow Authority has a meeting next Thursday where we're going to get to discuss this again, but I would like to be reassured that the members will see that before that meeting, because the reality is that could well drive a lot of the conversation. As a overdue scrutiny committee, I would have felt that it would have helped if we'd seen that, because we are all about the detail. I mean, I don't want to rain on anyone's parade, but I was very disappointed to see that as a result of this potential blueprint, we will have a contact hub at One Angel Square. Let's be clear, I don't want anything in One Angel Square. I don't want to be anywhere near One Angel Square. I want the West Northants to be paying for One Angel Square. I don't want anything there. And the public will not understand it if we're saying nothing has changed when things have changed and we need to move on. I'm thrilled that adult services feel they can move on in a way that they can ensure that they're in the new locations ahead of next year. I'm puzzled as to why we're believing as 4.7 saying that nothing else is planned at this stage. I'm disappointed by that. I recognise that COVID has caused delays, but it would have been nice to see timelines as to how we can move this forward on that basis.
Thank you, Adam. Before I move on to the next speaker, I wonder if officers can reply to the specific question about the 102-page document you mentioned and when that's likely to be seen, although I would like to bring officers in at the end for a more detailed discussion. But on that specific question.
Yes, Chair, I'll pick that one up. So this is a high-level view of the blueprint that we took through the Shadow Executive, mainly to gain consensus that it was going in the right direction. It was always the intention to build on that detail once we had that. And the 102-page or so detailed blueprint for the North, as been referred to, will be going into the public domain on Monday. It's due to be debated at the Shadow Executive on the 24th. And obviously that, Scrutiny's involvement in that detailed blueprint would be very much welcome as well. It's not different to this, it builds on it, it answers some of the questions that are being asked. It talks a lot more about the ambition and the transformation. It doesn't fundamentally change how those services are put together. That will look the same in that detailed blueprint, but it absolutely does build on that detail and continues that story. Again, not a policy document, but it does build on that story and provides hopefully more assurance around being ready on day one as well. And some of those things that are being mentioned about day one safe and ready, it's about ensuring continuity for residents as well. So there's no major changes on day one unless we're preparing for those major changes, such as what you'll hear about around adult social care. And creating some stability for staff as well, and not huge upheavals for the workforce on day one, bearing in mind, as you quite rightly referred to, the situation with COVID and how we had to reflect the programme to make sure that we could deliver the statutory requirement to create the 2 unitaries to be safe and legal on day one, but also avoid the disruption that we didn't have time for because of the 6 months or so that we've lost. And there's no reason why, once those 2 new unitaries are up and running, that they can't reconsider or develop proposals and shape those in their image and how they want them to be through the usual mechanisms, and how they want to deliver services as well, and locations to deliver those services. You hear a lot more about hubs from Anna as well, in terms of how making those services local.
Okay, thank you. I have to say my initial response is to agree with Councillor Henley and regret that that 102-page document wasn't perhaps made public today, i.e. at this committee, because I think we would have liked to have seen it perhaps before the executive, but nonetheless others may come back to that. Paul, any other speakers?
Yes, we have Councillor Pengelly, Councillor Tickham, and then Councillor Hakewell.
Okay, thank you. And then I think Councillor Perry also put a hand up earlier. Is that right? Okay.
She put her thumb up. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I noticed that. Okay, so Councillor Pengelly, Mark.
Yeah. First thing is waste, both collecting and disposal. It seems to be put on the back burner. It's really important to everybody in North Northamptonshire how we reduce the amount of waste we have, and I'm just wondering why it's been put in with planning and other things. It just seems it's so centric to climate change. It's so important to climate change and what we do with our waste. And it just seems to be on the back burner. The officer talked about major changes in housing and about consultation. You can't consult with anybody unless you know what the new authority is going to do. And I hope there's no major change in housing. I hope from day one we say to the people of Corby and Kettering, look, your council housing's safe, it's going to stay safe, your rent's going to stay relatively the same, you're going to get your repairs done on time. So there's not much to consult on. So when people talk about major changes, what are these major changes? The people in Corby need to know, because if there are going to be major changes, we have to consult. And to tell you what, the Labour Party and the Labour group will not accept any major changes in how our housing stock is managed. And the final thing is, we had this YouTube thing today. What we need, and I've come in from being a member on a district borough for 25 years, there's a lot of this stuff that's totally over my head. I just don't understand some of it. The training we've had as new members is just minimal. We need to get proper training so we fully understand what's going on. We're not getting it. And you're asking us to make decisions on behalf of the public, to ask questions on behalf of the public, when we've had very, very little training on what a multi-million-pound spends. And it's wrong. This is just, the whole way we're looking at this is just not the way it should be. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mark. It's not for me to answer for officers, but on the housing question, the reply to the written question, I am assuming that the major change they're consulting with at the moment is purely moving from one council to another authority, because I agree, I don't think there's any, shouldn't be any, and aren't any immediate plans to how housing is delivered. That would be policy decisions, presumably, for any future elected councils. Sorry, who was the next speaker, Paul?
Councillor Tickham.
Of course. Greg, sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just a small bit to add. My first thing is to say thank you to the young people that took the time and the trouble to come along tonight and speak of their concerns, and which we all do share, but it was nice to see them here. So thanks to them. What do I add? Well, Councillor Davis, Councillor Hakewell, and indeed yourself, Chair, mentioned what we are doing now. Obviously, people will say it's not enough, but it took us 300 or 400 years to make a mess of this world, so it's not going to be an overnight fix. But we are working towards that, not just this council or this group, but the whole of this country has got on board with this. So, well, I don't know if it's right to say there's light at the end of the tunnel, but we are working towards cleaner and greener. So that's all I have to say, because everything else has gone before tonight. So thank you all for listening anyway. And thanks to the 2 people who turned up. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And it is interesting that this green agenda, climate change, whatever you call it, seems to be coming through again and again, and certainly for members of the public, and we do need to be aware of that. Right, I've got Councillors Hakewell and Councillor Perry. Jim.
I just wanted to say to Greg Titcombe, that's not light at the end of the tunnel. It's California burning and Siberia and other places. So it's not a light that you want. Just to pick up, and I think Councillor Anne Lee made this point, the general point is that Kettering, and I don't know what's happening in the other councils, although I do know that Northampton County are still doing scrutiny, have deleted all forms of scrutiny. And I would say that that's not a recent thing. But the planning white paper, when you look at the blueprint, is going to run a coach and horses right the way through what we understand as planning. Now, I can't find anywhere in Kettering Borough where that's being scrutinised, and I just make the plea, maybe it's for us at some point to have an agenda item on that, because it's going to be absolutely massive for the 2 new unitaries. And I also make the same point about the local government code of conduct, which we talked about last time. And I know Liz said that East Northants and Wellingborough had talked about it, Kettering had not. So I just wonder if there is an opportunity for some of these major things which are going under the radar at the moment to be drawn together in future overview and scrutiny meetings of this shadow, so that, as I think Councillor Pengelly was saying about training, for those of us who are not getting anything in our home authorities, that there's a sort of drawing together of views and consultations that are quite massive coming to us, rather than going under the radar for some and on the radar for others. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. I'll bring in Victoria now, and afterwards I want to try and bring this item to a close. I'm very conscious of the time already, and we've still got a long way to go, but I will, of course, be bringing officers in to sort of comment on anything they've heard. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we thank the young people. Can we also thank the slightly less young people that also spoke? I'll do a call out for Alison there. She does a lot of good work. Just on the extended paper, scrutiny, Paul said, need to comment, or it would be valuable if we commented on the more detailed paper. But it's going to go to executive before we've had the opportunity to do that. And that brings up the point which has been clearly evident from the beginning, and we have raised it as a committee again and again, that we as a committee and as a function in this shadow are very poorly embedded in the whole programme of decisions and approvals. And we've tried to adjust it, but we're never quite in step with what's happening. And it's, you know, if scrutiny were important, for example, on the blueprint, when it talks about the timeline, it talks about consultation with the public, consultation with members. It doesn't say talk about scrutiny. We need to get our function recognised and embedded in a timely fashion. It needs to happen very soon. A 150-page paper, scrutiny means detail, isn't it? Scrutinising the detail, and we're not getting the detail. We're getting the same as the public, and we're getting it after the event. And quite simply, that, in my opinion, isn't good enough. And that is no comment on the quality of the blueprint. And we appreciate the work that's gone into it and all the difficulties. But we know from NCC how important scrutiny is and how important it is to get it right. So I'm saying that now, it needs to get better. And in terms of training, I totally agree with Mark. We've got a huge range of members, some with no experience at all of demand-led services, making decisions, and we're going to be looking at budgets of hundreds of millions of pounds without training. And again, that is not as representing the public in a manner in which we should be and should aspire to.
Thank you, Victoria. I have to say, I tend to agree with your points about scrutiny. It does feel to me as though we're playing catch up rather than necessarily being influential, which is what we could be doing, and helping the executive and informing their thoughts and discussions. Paul, are there any more speakers?
I think if you can allow one more, Chair. Councillor Davis, I think, wanted to come back in.
Ash, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a very quick point regarding the planning white paper document Councillor Hake will mention. We did have a very robust debate, certainly at Kettring's Planning Policy Committee meeting last week, which was very informative to decide our officer response. I don't know about other constituent councils where they've spoken about that. And certainly Councillor Perry's point about training would definitely agree that could be an area to improve. Thank you.
And interestingly, that Kettering Borough Council Policy Committee, one of the highlights of that was again the input in the engagement from members of the public, which helped lead the debate, I understand. So it's really good when that can happen. Okay, I'm going to pass it over briefly then to Anna and Paul to sort of pick up anything that you've heard from the discussion and debate. If I could ask you to be as succinct as possible. I say we're already well behind schedule, of course.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think there's a lot to add. I'll just maybe one comment. I accept obviously the YouTube presentation wasn't the ideal way to engage, and Paul and I think said to people we would much rather have had a two-way debate and been able to come out and see members and have proper interaction. That would have always been our choice. But I guess in this environment with COVID and everything else, we have the situation we do. Probably just one more comment, not so much about the use of Angel Square, but just to make the comment about the hub being here. The point really, I think really for that is for our staff and the unions who want to know what's going to happen, we needed to make the point really about people staying in one location for day one. Obviously if they move, that's a disruption to the services and for the customers that they look after, and also there'll be a cost as well, because if you change their location then we have to cover the expenses of travelling to different places. But I can reassure you that the one thing that we are doing is making sure that regardless of where the contact centres sit, is the technology is being put in place, and people may have seen this on the YouTube video earlier on, to make sure that actually when the person calls, what they hear is, hello, this is Northamptonshire Council, how can I help you? And all the technology is being set up so that no matter where somebody is, that they are still representing the council and they're seen as representing the council, so that they get a good service still, and that nothing is branded obviously as Angel Square or anything other than Northants. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So we need to decide whether we have any comments then to pass on to the executive when they discuss this document. I mean, I certainly think, I take Anna's point earlier that, this is not a policy document. It doesn't set out exactly how the new council will operate, but listening to all those comments from the public and from some members, I do think that maybe more emphasis should be made in the document somewhere about climate change and sort of the green agenda. Paul, can I ask, have you got a flavour of anything from the discussion that you could maybe cobble together for our betters?
Right. Yeah, obviously there was a lot of supportive statements about ensuring, the strong digital approach, looking for inward investment, improvements for residents, obviously. the holistic approach, which is the word of the day, I think, the holistic approach to ensuring that the services are linked together and you get maximum benefit. Obviously, there were some issues about things such as waste disposal, ensuring that housing service was, any potential disruption was mitigated.
Okay. I mean, I think generally people were positive about the document itself, although yes, there were clearly some of those you know, small specific points that needed to be raised. So can I suggest that if you're able, you cobble a few bullet points along the discussion that you've just outlined and send it into the executive? Or do any members have any problem with that, or indeed do you want anything specifically to be added or taken out of that? Okay, agreement then. In which case, can I thank Anna and Paul, and in particular, I don't know if I think some of them have left now, obviously, but all the members of the public who took the trouble and had to wait, obviously, took the trouble to inform us of their views, and I hope that those views have been taken on board, and I further hope that some of those views will be taken on board by the decision makers. All right, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Paul.
Yeah, I will just now, Alison, I'm going to be removing you from the meeting at this point. Thank you very much.
And of course, you are welcome to watch the rest of it on YouTube. Right, that brings us then.
Chair, yes. Chair, could I just say that Glenn Hammonds has to leave in about half an hour's time at the latest. So if you wanted any input from him, if we could cover that as soon as possible, please.
And sorry, what would he be inputting specifically on?
Probably. Go on, Paul.
Sorry, apologies, Liz. Chair, it would be on the information report on the financial monitoring.
Sorry, that's the programme director's update, is it?
That falls under the programme director's report.
Okay. However, we've already adjourned item 6, so I suggest we go ahead with that. But all of us, I think, need to keep an eye on the clock and keep our comments. I'm not trying to curtail any discussion at all, but let's try and keep things as you know, succinct as we can. Adult Services update. This will be presented by Katie Brown, who's an Assistant Director from NCC's Adult Services, along with Anna Earnshaw, of course, who is the Director of Adult Services. So Katie or Anna.
So if it's okay, Chair, I will start. Katie's with us too, and Katie actually will be the acting DAS when I take up the new role in West Northants Council, so but fundamentally involved in this. I don't know whether we're able to put up the slides, but what I'll do in the spirit of the time that we've got and everything, thank you, is I will talk you through the high level details. Oh, that's not the right slides. Sorry, that's not the correct ones that have been put out in the pack.
Oh, okay. Sorry, these are the ones I got in an email.
Sorry, these were the ones just to support the specific questions that were asked last time, Anna, about assurance around the timescale and the activities to ensure that we were rolling out as planned.
Okay, well, sorry, Chair, apologies. Let me just talk through the highlights then. So in the actual appendix that you received for this part of the agenda, we've set out for members some of the core transformational things that we're doing in adults at the moment, and they involve changing the ways that we're working and our processes. We're also implementing a new system to support the way staff work. We're doing a lot of work with health in terms of integration, and we're introducing a new way of working, something called connecting conversations, or the 3 conversations, which members again may have heard of if they've watched the YouTube video about the blueprint. We're obviously in a very detailed process at the moment to split out adult social services, as we've talked about, and we're on plan to do that by November. But we're also undertaking a number of key things to implement savings, but most of all to change outcomes for adults and how we deal with our adults and the way we interact with them. and to improve many of the processes and the ways that we look after people. And I just really want to touch on some of those if I can, please. Within the appendix, you'll see that we've talked about a new vision for excellence in adults. And the key for this is obviously that we want to make the best use of the money that we've got to keep people safe and to make sure that they're independent. And it sets out there some of the key aspects of that, which is very much about making sure we support people through whatever crisis or support that they might need from us over the duration, that we make sure they only have to tell us something once, and that we also do something that we call sticking like glue, so that where somebody presents to us with a problem or contacts us with a problem, that rather than pass them from pillar to post or different teams, that actually the social worker in future will stay with that person and work with them to achieve what they're trying to achieve. So members may be aware that adults did a detailed piece of work to look at some of the challenges we had in the quality of service and the experience of service, and how good we were compared to other local authorities. And that piece of work, alongside some feedback we got from Health Watch and customers, showed us that actually we weren't achieving the best outcomes for people in many cases. And that too often we had, as one of the members alluded to earlier on, a system of saying, no, you're not eligible, and turning someone away, or computer says no to something, and that we were passing so many people from pillar to post, and we weren't also making the best use of our workforce. The result of that is we weren't doing as many reviews as we wanted of people, and we also weren't achieving the best outcomes for people. And compared to other areas, we were seeing more and more people ending up with long-term formal care, when actually they could have been helped more effectively if we adopt different practice. So we've been working for some months now, and Katie's been right in the thick of it. And we've been focusing on a number of key areas, which in the appendix it shares with you. And I'd just like to share a couple of early highlights from that, which are set out in here for you, because this is what it's all about, really. This is about what it means for people, not for the service. So in terms of reablement, which is something we do to help people get back on their feet if they've been in hospital or had a fall or had an issue or a crisis, we're now able to see 600 more people a year as a result of the work that we've done with those teams and our partners, and really improve the amount of people who now are independent at the end of that reablement period. And that's got a significant outcome, both in terms of cost, because it means far less people go on to need long-term social care, but also in terms of efficiencies too. And we've also done that without increasing the size of the team, just by working better and smarter. We've also been working with our learning disability teams, and now we're finding that 10 out of 22 people that went through the community hubs are getting better outcomes, and actually the teams are agreeing that they have achieved those better outcomes in terms of doing the best that we can for people. Work is ongoing at the moment with our acute partners in health, and very, very timely too as we head towards winter and obviously the fear of a second COVID outbreak, is that we've been working very closely on processes with them, and again, how we improve things and try to make sure that people spend as least time possible in hospital if they don't need to be there. And particularly we've been looking at these community hubs, and our teams have been working on a number of pilot sites where we're actually bringing together staff out in the communities who'll be working with town and parish councils, with local communities and volunteers to work with customers to try and make sure that we connect them to local support and other ways of doing things, and not always just to social care or also to set solutions. And we've seen some really great successes out of doing that work. We've identified a number of hubs already and started to roll those out. And by the time we've finished, we will have 12 hubs across across the 2 unitary areas, at which we will have all of our staff deployed, and those staff will get to know the areas, get to know parish councils and other councils and members, to make sure that actually we can do more effective things in the community. And I think the slides set out some of the great results that we're seeing, and I would turn your attention to particularly some of the quotes from staff and also from residents. One that strikes me very hard, and I've heard people say this to me as Director of Adult Social Services, which says that some people needed our help, and we found that we've been turned away over 30 times before when we've approached adult social care. And that's because we've had a very mechanistic way of dealing with things in terms of eligibility. And now we're able to help far more people in more informal ways, and in ways that help them to get those outcomes. And you'll see in there that actually we're seeing within those community teams that 1 in 2 people are achieving better outcomes and more independence. that 54% of people actually needed no further help after the first conversation that we'll have had with them about how we can help to support them to achieve their outcomes. And that's critical, both in terms of them getting the help they need before they get to crisis and also reducing our costs. And also within the pack, you'll see there are a number of quotes, not just from our people and customers, but also our staff who are feeling really inspired by this new way of working and this new conversation and the chance to really do things differently, because part of this model is about empowering those staff to actually be able to make the decisions that they want about what's right for the person. Key also to the hubs will be the way we work with partners. You'll see in the slides that it talks about how we're going to be moving to the hubs, working alongside housing, health partners, drug and alcohol services, and in some cases we're going to be working from GP sites or with the existing GP surgeries and health partners too. And that's absolutely vital to the way we work going forward. We've mentioned the word holistic several times tonight, and this is really about wrapping around people and making sure that we draw in all the services we need to keep people out of crisis. Our staff, as I said, have been very, very supportive. I'm pleased to say as well that the unions have been very, very supportive. And perhaps, Katie, before we sort of open it up to questions from members, you might just want to comment on the process at a high level that we're going through as well to split our staff to make sure that all areas of the county and North Northants actually have skilled social workers out on the ground and working in those communities.
Yeah, so some of the slides that I've done for Francesca and for all of you, which hopefully you will then be sent, will show you the processes that we are going through to get to the point where our staff fully roll out on what will be the 19th of October. The 19th of October was a date that we set about 3 or 4 months ago, and we're still on track to ensure that on that day, adult social care will be rolled out across both unitary footprints. At the moment, we are a week away from them completing their preferencing exercise. So in adult social care, we have asked the teams to preference 3 choices, but the ultimate decision in terms of where people go is purely dependent on skill mix. We have to make sure that we have the right balance of non-qualified, qualified social workers, depending on the work, and we make sure that that's sustainable for each of those localities. The work that we've done to make sure that we've got the right level of staff in each of the localities has been purely done on current demand and trends over the last 2 or 3 years. And that has given us some assurance that we have the right level of staff that we are planning to put in those areas. In terms of accommodation, so on the slides that I hope you, Francesca will send around, you'll see that we have locality bases, certainly till April in all of the key areas, so that'll be East Northants, Wellingborough, Kettering and Corby. The conversation we've had with the staff is that we can ensure that until April, they will be out doing that work in the localities, but we need to give the 2 new unitaries the flexibility to be able to transform through accommodation and how workforce and services work together in the future, obviously differently in the north and west, how they will then be co-located potentially differently or work differently depending on the population needs in the area they work. So I think that's given us a degree of flexibility for the future transformation that needs to happen on top of the layering for adult social care, but also ensures that we are able to embed certainly the strengths-based working, the 3 conversations model over the next 6 months.
Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, you're on mute, Chair.
Apologies. Thank you both very much for that. I'll throw this open to members of the committee. We're being asked to note this report, although it's really interesting, isn't it? Because this is one of these areas where things sort of get mixed up a little bit. A lot of what we've heard is about what NCC are doing, and to some respects nothing to do with what the unitary, or certainly what the shadow authorities does. But of course there's all those about splitting between north and west. It's very much pertinent to us. Members, any comments or questions?
Chair.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Pengelly, followed by Councillor Davis.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, the officer spoke briefly about the unions being supportive. I'd like to know what the union's involvement in this has been, because you're talking about a lot of their staff who are really, really important in making sure this goes forward. So what has been the consultation and what has been the view of the union, and how have they been involved? Thank you.
So they have been involved as far back as a year ago when we started to look at how we work differently. In terms of the two areas of innovation sites, so there's obviously the one in Northamptonshire is Corby. The unions have had meetings with them outside of any officer like myself being present to talk through the ways of working, what that feels, what they would like to see in the future, and they have been fully involved in the consultation process to date. What the feedback is from the staff is that this gives them the opportunity to go back to doing what they came into the profession for, which is true social work and social care, without some of the real restrictions of the processes that over the years we have become ingrained in. And therefore they are very supportive, because for the staff that have been working in this way since February, the feedback from them about how they feel about doing their job and the ability they have to then support people differently in the way that they feel is true to their profession means that the unions are very supportive in how this approach going forward. And particularly in light of the fact that we are giving people some real choice and engagement about where they choose to work and in what capacity. So whether that's at the front door in community teams, or whether that's doing progression work with our customers that we have long-term responsibility for.
Brilliant, thank you. That's really refreshing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Ash.
Thank you, Chair. I think as a committee, obviously, if stuff isn't going well, we speak, and if stuff is going very well, we should pay tribute. And I think that's an occasion like this. Clearly, lots of positives. You know, it's brilliant to hear that frontline staff are being empowered and being brought along with it and being able to input, because they're the ones that are going to deliver this transformation and this change. I'm really pleased to see that the culture of passing people from pillar to post at their hour of need is hopefully going to come to an end. I think, you know, we spoke about outcomes earlier. It's key, you know, that we help as many people, young and old, through our adult social care. Clearly, there's obviously good work and good strides being made, perhaps to work with the voluntary sector, third sector, and NHS. You know, I think just reflecting on what we do in Kettering Futures Partnership, I'd like that to be hopefully a model for the North as well. So again, it's quality of service, consistency, and involving everyone who's likely to be involved in these outcomes, in the decisions and in the delivery. So yeah, really positive. You know, obviously there's still work to be done. It's not, you know, we're not there yet, but let's pay tribute to all these frontline staff and officers delivering, and you know, hopefully going to get a better situation, more cost-effective situation, but absolutely far better service quality and better outcomes. So yeah, thank you.
And just to add, in terms of our both innovation sites, we are working really closely with both the third sector housing in different parts. We're co-locating with community police and the local housing officers. It's dependent on the local population and what they need, which I think is what is the kind of beauty of this model.
Excellent. Thank you, Ash. Thank you, Katie. Paul, anybody else?
Yes, Councillor Henley, then Councillor Perry.
Adam.
Thank you, Chair. I would have to agree. I was genuinely interested by the presentation that was sent out, and it is a thing that's quite near to my heart, because my father was a social worker before he passed away many years ago now. But my only query was that when it came to the highlights, it didn't really give me the context. So, for example, it says 600 additional people per year, but I don't know as to what the baseline was. So if it was, say, 100 people, then we go to 700. If it's 10,000, then we go to 10,600. It's just context there that I don't have, and this doesn't unfortunately give it to me. In the same way, it says a 10% improvement in the independence of people. I don't know if we've moved from 0 to 10% or 90% to 100%. It'd just be useful if we could have that context. Also, how we compare now or then against other councils of a similar size, just so that are we now going to be country leading, or are we now going to be in the pack? I apologise that I don't know that question, the answer to that question, but it'd be useful if anyone could give that answer.
I can, sorry, if it helps, I can send through the baseline so you can see. So our reablement episodes are in the thousands rather than the hundreds, about last year was about 2,000, just short of 2,000. So it depends on the different things, and reduction of care is normally in hours. So I'm more than happy to send that through so you can see where we were, where we are now, where we have trialled the different ways of working and what that will mean going forward for the wider.
If that could go perhaps to Paul, so that could be circulated to all committee members, because Adam, you make an excellent point about context. With a scrutiny committee, we need to drill down in the detail, and actually to understand figures and percentages, you do need to get the whole picture. So that, yeah, that would be very useful. Victoria.
Sorry, apologies, Chair. So could I just pick up the other question that Councillor Henley asked, if that's okay, through you? Is just to say, so actually we're already a high performing service in terms of national benchmarks. So I think of the 20 indicators that we're measured by, 14 are at or above best performance. 6 aren't, but we're very close in them. However, it's true to say that sometimes those measures don't actually tell the full story, do they? We're also, financially very efficient too. And what we're trying to do is improve, obviously, the outcome side of it, so that people don't just say, well, we did what it said on the tin and we ticked the box, but actually the experience was good too. So we are already high performing. This would take us to, best practice across the piece.
Thank you.
And again, context, if every other council is getting all of their measures as high performing, that would tell a slightly different story. But I absolutely take your point, and I'm not questioning the wider point. Victoria.
Right, just before I'm at a point, I think Adam made a really good point about context. So our adult social care at NCC is one of the lowest costs per head in the country, and yet it's over delivering. And I think that information about all our services is readily available to those of us at NCC. So I don't see why that couldn't be available across, because all these rumours start, don't they? Children's were the most expensive. Well, we were, but we're not anymore. And I think that information, when we're looking at budget, and it would be really important for the committee to have. But as a not very trusting person, when people tell me about improvements, I tend to try and go and test it. And I would do that by talking to the end user. And the end user is my residents and staff. And I've been blown away by the positive feedback I've had from social workers. They're not always the most positive people because they have a very hard job. But I've had some really positive feedback from staff to me as an elected member, but also with residents. And I can see this when my inbox fills up with issues around adult social care. When I send that email or that issue forward, I never have to touch it again now. It really does just get dealt with, and it disappears from my inbox, which anyone will know as an elected member, that is amazing, because all you get is someone emailing you saying, thank you, you've basically helped my life. And when you're dealing with adult social care, you really are, when you have a positive outcome, you really are helping people. And it's part of the job that I love, and what they're delivering at NCC now is making that part of the job absolutely fantastic. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. Paul, any other comments?
No.
Okay. In that case, I presume we agree to do what we've been asked and to note the report. And it is certainly useful for us all to know what the county council are doing and how things will look as we move towards splitting into the two areas. Okay, that brings us on, and again, very conscious of time, that brings us on to item 8, which is the programme director's update. Now, for this meeting, we hadn't asked for a full presentation from Paul Helsby. This was really just for us to note, although of course he's here to not only answer any questions that we may have, but I do understand, Paul, you would like to update us on a couple of things that may have changed since perhaps the documents we've been sent.
Thank you, Chair, and more than happy to take any questions. And I think it's just a cycle of reporting that the report that you have now is slightly out of date in a couple of areas, and with the new report, which covers the period of August, is going through the shadow executive on the 24th. and that will be published early next week as well. I suppose the two areas really that have changed since then is that we're now reporting 3 areas of amber rather than 4 areas of amber, and the direction of travel is only 1 area of amber in the next report rather than 2. And also there's been an increase in the number of change champions since this last report. We're up to just under 350 change champions now, and we've got a much more developed understanding of where those gaps might be and where we need to recruit more change champions service by service specifically, and we're talking to chief execs and senior management teams to validate that and to really encourage and support the recruitment of more change champions to support us through the implementation phase of the programme. And the other part of that as well is that we've developed an action plan around the LGA review, which was overall really positive and affirmed a lot of things, and it was intended to help us to strengthen any areas as we moved into the implementation phase. And there were some recommendations that came out of that, and that action plan has been assigned with senior officer owners to make sure that we pick up on those as well, and that's available if required. It's a lot of detail, but it is available if required. I'm more than happy to share it with members. And also Glenn, who's I think still on the line, is standing by if there are any questions around the financial aspects of that as well. And if there's any questions, happy to take those. And there'll be 1 or 2 changes reported in that next report as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And members, any comments or questions?
Chair, Councillor Harrison, Councillor Hakewell, Councillor Henley, you put your hand down? Yeah, okay. Councillor Harrison and Councillor Hakewell, Chair.
Helen.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to know, in terms of the programme status, I'm a little bit confused because we're getting various personnel changes. Anna Earnshaw obviously has her new post to take up. Congratulations on that. And I think Liz has resigned is resigning from the shadow, North Northants shadow. And both of those 2 people have pretty important programme lead roles in this. Are both of you still continuing in those roles, or is there going to be some massive shake-up and interruption in the programme going forward? Thanks.
Do you want me to answer that, Anna and Liz? Hopefully, I'll say what I think before they change their minds. No, they're both fully committed to the areas that they are leading on. Each of those areas are a huge team effort, big areas, and rely on that really high level and important leadership. And I'd also just add as well that we're bringing some chief exec leadership to day 1 readiness as well through George Candler, who's agreed to take on that at a chief officer level. He'll be overseeing day 1 assurance, which sits in the programme as well. And also George is taking the lead as a chief officer on comms and engagement as well, to make sure it's got some real impetus as we move into the next phase of critical implementation. So I hope I've not said anything on behalf of Liz and Anna there that they don't agree with. We'll have to have a chat afterwards if that's the case, but I'd be very disappointed if it was a different view than the one I've just given you.
Okay, Helen, you happy with the response? Okay, Jim, Councillor Hakewell.
Thank you, Chairman. Page 66, clickety-click 66. I appreciate it's late. That item talks about outturn position, and I'm glad Glenn is there, but you've got some meeting to go to, so don't worry, because you could probably watch this video tomorrow. And speaking from experience as a scrutiny in Northamptonshire County Council, when you look at page 66, you see in the 3rd column mitigations, income grant, efficiencies, use of reserves. Now, throughout the time of going towards unitary, there's always been this question of what reserves will be there, what liabilities will be there. And I appreciate, Chairman, that will be for another time. But if you look in the paragraph immediately below, there's a common theme amongst district and borough, many pressures. Unfortunately, despite receiving government funding, there's still an overall shortfall forecast of 8.56 million. Use of reserves was effectively what Eric Pickles said we all had to do 10 years ago, and government pursued it with enthusiasm, and the county perhaps too much enthusiasm. But that really does concern me in terms of financial scrutiny, and maybe for the future, that dipping into reserves, which presumably weren't just sitting there waiting to be used, is a haunting from the past as far as I'm concerned. The second point I'll make, and I do accept that Glenn might want to answer this, or others may agree with me, on 3 conclusion, page 67, it says at the end of paragraph 1, risk remains high. Well, that's an interesting phrase, but by the end of 2021, a total of approximately 50 million worth of savings will have been delivered. That 50 million came up in the presentation this morning, with an additional 35 million, if it's the same 50 million, to be delivered by the end of the year. For the life of me, I can't see how transformation has already delivered 50 million, not for tonight, not for this hour, but I would really like a drill down into the 50 million saved and the 35 million anticipated to be saved, and maybe a comment on the dipping into reserves, which would normally be going across to the new unitaries. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Glenn, I don't know if you want to comment. My quick question as an add-on to that, the 50 million presumably isn't just this financial year, it's been the last couple of years, has it?
It certainly has, Chair, yes. A couple of comments just to pick up on those. In terms of the position within districts with regards to COVID, obviously that is the current position, and that's what's been reported in each of those districts. And there is a common theme there that the resources that are coming out of government and have been allocated to date don't cover all the estimated pressures. There is certainly, a lot of extra lobbying still going on with government. And one of the particular areas that I think we will see some further funding coming from government is with regards to the scheme that's been announced on sales, fees and charges, essentially the income that councils get, where the government has announced a scheme that will receive some of that money potentially lost coming back into councils through government grants. So that position will improve once we get clarity on how much is each council is able to claim on that. However, I think given where things are currently, there is likely to be a call on reserves from those district councils, which will obviously reduce the amount of reserves that are available for transfer to the new unitary council. With regards to the 50 million, what we've got to remember is that the Future Northants project is a multi-year project, and we're in the second year of it now. And if members were to look at Appendix 1 of the report, it provides a little more detail on the benefits that are being realised through the programme. And it breaks it down there between the business rate retention schemes and also the transformation that's been happening at the county council. What you'll see there is that in the 1920 financial year, there was delivered almost £35 million worth of savings. So they were delivered and are in the bank. In the current financial year, there is expected to be almost £15 million worth that's delivered of savings. And that's what makes up the 50 million that was referred to earlier. Looking forward over into 2021 and the medium term, there is expectations as a result of the Future Northants programme and through further transformation that a further £35 million is planned in the future. That is obviously for the two Northampton unitaries, of which a proportion will be coming to the and realised in Northamptonshire.
Okay, thank you very much. Just if I may, just as a quick supplementary, I mean, you mentioned the COVID situation might call upon reserves from the districts and boroughs, and this is what every council, I guess, is looking at up and down the country. But presumably, if those COVID pressures remain, reserves are just a one-off. So if there are extra expenditures, if you like, that carry on into next year, that's going to be a budget a pressure for next year's budget, isn't it?
That is correct, yes. And the work that we're doing currently in terms of preparing for next year's budget is looking to identify those COVID pressures specifically that are continuing into next year. As we stand here currently, all of the government funding that's been allocated is in relation to the current financial year, and there is lobbying going on, not just from ourselves, but all councils around the country to make sure it's factored into the spending review, which is due to be announced later on in this financial year.
Which is going to make our job of looking at the draft budget very interesting, but hopefully the government will do the right thing. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, Councillor Pengelly wishes to come in, Chair.
Mark.
Yeah, Chair, I think it's with great interest when I'm looking at, it's page 66, but I've got the amended document that came out later, and it's to do with leisure services, and we see the in-house service at Corby's lost a little bit of money, but those that have been outsourced are at so much risk, and this is something we should look at in the future. We've got outsourced leisure services up and down the country that are going bust, that are leaving councils with no swimming pools, leisure centres and whatever. I think it's really important that we look at probably bringing all the leisure services in North Northants back in-house in the future, and I think that's what Labour will do if we get power anyway. Thank you.
And yeah, that will be a discussion, I guess, on the campaign trail. And I tend to agree with you, but we shall see. Sorry, Paul Helsby, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, it was only very quickly, Chair, that as I said right at the beginning, I would try and update you in real time on any significant changes to the report that you'll be seeing in the next of my reports, and particularly the finance one. And in that column about overall adverse variances, you'll see against the NCC line, it was showing a positive variance, which is shown as a negative in financial terms. So I'm sure Glenn can explain that far better than I can. But basically, it's forecasting an underspend of 172,000 in the county council. And it's not a secret because it's been published in the county council's reports that figure that you'll see next month in this report has moved to a further positive variance of 3.3 million. So that's a £3.3 million forecast underspend for the county council, which obviously helps the overall position and obviously helps the unitary's position on day one as well. So I just wanted to update you on that significant change that you will see in the next report.
And let's hope that remains the position for the rest
Absolutely.
of the year, of course. Okay, great. Any other comments, or can we put this one to bed? Great. In that case, thank you very much, Paul, and thank you very much, Glenn, for your comments. And I will move us on then as quickly as I can to the next item, which is forward plan of decisions, page 83 on in your documents today. This really is, again, just to inform us of the current forward plan, but I am happy, of course, to take any questions or comments. No. Paul, nobody?
No.
In that case, we will mark that as noted. We've got a copy of it now for our own records and we can keep track of it. That brings us then on to item 10, which is this committee's work programme. I can inform you, you'll remember at the last meeting, myself and the deputy chair said we'd go away and have discussions with officers about some of the things that we wanted to discuss. There were children's, adult, budget, these were the sort of big highlight things. I can tell you that at the moment we are planning at our next meeting in October to talk about children's services, specifically the Children's Trust, and how that will affect, or what the role of new unitary councillors will be. We're going to invite the leader and deputy leader along as well to talk about that. And also on the agenda for that next meeting will be the council tax harmonisation issue, because we know that their working group has finished, so we'll get the opportunity to look into some details of that. In November, again, at the moment, the plan is to invite the leader and deputy leader to give, if you like, a sort of state of the nation address, inform us where we are unitary wise, you know, where the plans are. And sort of December, January will of course be our most important role, I think, looking at the draft budget for the next financial year for the new council. We envisage that taking sort of December, January. It will probably be that we'll have to set up various working groups to look at some of the details. It is going to be a big job. I appreciate members come from different backgrounds, smaller and bigger councils, but once you throw in adult social care and children's trust, things get very, very big. But I say we'll look at a plan for how we do that once the draft budget is published. Any questions about or suggestions indeed for the work programme?
Councillor Hakewell wishes to come in, Chair.
Jim.
Yep, council tax harmonisation. We had an interesting meeting with NCALC, Danny Moody, because of the unique situation in Kettering in relation to the other three districts, where Kettering has tiny precepts in relation. And in other words, the towns and parishes across the rest of the north do many more services that Kettering does for Kettering. So I'm still concerned that in council tax harmonisation, there is, as far as I can see, no interest or no discussion about that unique situation. What we actually need is an audit of what all the town and parishes 95 do, and then work out how that will work as far as Kettering's concerned. So I make the point simply to make the point that it should be there. The other aspect is hybrid meetings. And I know it's difficult for us as we go forward, and everyone talks about the gravity of, you know, the amazingly big things going on. But some point for the new authority, or in advance of, I think there should be some sort of debate. I say it cautiously after tonight's experience, but I do think that online or video participation will be a massive benefit to all of us in our campaigning, where people can actually get onto a council who can't fastidiously go to every single meeting, but can contribute amazingly well when they do. So I don't know where, Chairman, that would be. Don't expect an answer now, but some form of scrutiny about how do people feel online goes, and whether or not some form of hybrid should be part of the new two unitaries. And the last one, again, picking up your rapport with Councillor Pengelly about the elections and who may or may not win, but it seems also to me that we need to have some debate with COVID about what is likely to happen in May next year as far as elections are concerned, and what standby opportunities there are. I dread to mention the American situation, but postal voting, in-person voting and so on is going to be massive for the new unitaries. And the thing I think everyone would dread is someone says, all right, you can have a 7th year because we can't all visit a polling station on that day. So harmonisation, town and parish, still not on the agenda. Hybrid meetings and some sort of scrutiny debate about what we might expect or not expect for elections next year.
Yeah,
Thank you, Chairman.
I must admit, I do wonder if, you know, because of the COVID situation, we might end up with a 100% postal vote, postal ballot, but we'll see. If you don't mind, if you leave those couple of future ideas with me, we can maybe discuss them and throw them in the mix in the future. Paul, can I ask, however, I don't know exactly what we're going to be looking at council tax harmonisation, but I do understand precepting is of interest. I presume that the working group looked at it. So would it be possible to get a detailed list of different precepts from different parishes and towns to go alongside with whatever you're going to produce for us anyway?
We can certainly flag that up. I know that Councillor Jenny, I'm sure that I've been at a meeting, I've been at a lot of meetings, at a meeting where Councillor Jenny addressed this issue and made the point that the precept that parish councils or town councils set is obviously a matter for them, not for the shadow authority. But I mean, that, if you like, information gathering exercise we can do, because we can probably pull the information from the respective reports that went to the sovereign councils last February, when the parish precepts would have to have been reported.
Totally take the point. It's nothing to do with this authority, everything and their decision. However, it's about, I suppose, context that we were talking about earlier.
But sorry,
no, Chairman.
Sorry, if I can just finish before Councillor Hakewell comes back in. But obviously, what is likely to happen as council tax harmonisation and any support scheme, etc., may have an impact on the precepts. So I mean, we can make sure this is flagged up in advance of that report coming to committee.
Chairman, I've absolutely, I know it's late, but I keep getting this response. If you look at the 95 parishes in the north of Northamptonshire, and if I look now, for example, Barton Seagrave has about 4,000 people and 70,000 precept. Oundle has about 200 more and £494,000 parish precept. The point I'm desperately trying to make is that when you harmonise council tax above, if you live in East Northants, you will expect Thrapston, Oundle, Rushden to do far more work and take far more tax than does East Northants. And I'm sure some of those other councils know that. So what I'm trying to say is that we have to understand what services those towns and parishes do in relation to Kettering as well, which is historically low. You know, if you look through the 95, and I've got them on my screen here,
yeah,
if someone's spending £500,000 cutting the grass, and in Kettering Borough does it, what we're effectively saying is, if you harmonise the Kettering Borough tax, the good people of Rushden and Oundle will be subsidising the grass cutting in Kettering. And Councillor Jenny still doesn't understand it, and we actually need to bottom this out.
I understand your point. So I don't want to get into the debate now, because we're going to have it on the agenda in the future. We understand, and I think it's mentioned in the minutes of the last meeting quite clearly, that there are no immediate changes for whatever the parishes and towns do at the moment, but that doesn't get away from your wider point. And yes, let's get those details and have a talk about it, but at the next meeting. Okay, any other comments? In that case, that brings us...
Oh, I've got my hand up.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Councillor.
Well,
yeah. Two matters. One is training that was mentioned earlier today. We need to find out exactly what training is going to happen, when it's going to happen, so that we're making decisions on matters that we have we're fully informed on. And the second one is the trade unions. At the last meeting, it was in the minutes that I said, have the trade unions been negotiated with, are they being spoken to? We do know that with adult social care they have been, but there are other wide-ranging parts of the new unitary where they haven't been spoken to. I think it'd be really good for us to invite a senior trade union rep from Unison or whatever to come to this meeting to talk to us about how they think things are going. We're hearing how our officers are going, which is quite right, but I'd like to hear what the trade unions have to say and what their view is how things are going.
Okay, thank you, Mark. On the training, yes, we discussed this also at the last meeting, and this is on sort of ongoing discussions outside of here. But yes, we do need to finalise that and come back with some proposals. The unions last time, Elliot said she had a meeting or was planning a meeting with them. I don't know if that meeting has yet taken place. Liz?
It was yesterday, Chair. So I met with 2 members of Unison and 1 member of GMB, 2 Unison regional and GMB regional, and 1 local Unison rep. And we discussed engagement and negotiation with them. And I believe there was a meeting today with unions as well to go through the blueprint and to engage them further. So my meeting with them, I've got some points that both George Candler and I took, and we'll refer them on to Martin Cox, who's the HR enabler for the FN programme, and he can help to take those points forward. So unfortunately, I can't do anything more than that now because I've only got a week to go, but they will be taking those issues forward, and the unions are now getting more engaged and are being shared the information ahead of it going public so that they've at least got a chance to see it. Only a couple of days, unfortunately, because the timescales are so tight, but they are getting better engagement now, I believe.
Okay, I have absolutely no problem with Mark's idea of this committee looking or listening to the unions if they have a different story. If you know what we're being told from officers, they have a slightly different take on it. Mark, can I suggest? I mean, you've got some good ties with the unions. They had the meeting yesterday. The unions themselves have had a meeting today. Can you maybe have a chat, find out how they're thinking, and maybe talk to me, and we can look at doing that if it's necessary. I don't want to waste our time if it's not. But
Well, yeah, I can do, Chair, but I think it's always useful to listen to people that represent, I don't know how many thousand workers, to come to our committee and listen to what they've got to say. It could all be positive, which would be great, but they've got a really, really important role in the future of this North Northants Authority. Thank you.
Okay, in that case, that's something that we will discuss after this meeting about doing it. Okay. Thank you very much for everybody for attending. I'm really sorry that this meeting.
Mick, sorry, could we just have in the feedback the point I made about getting our timings right, and as scrutiny as getting the information we need at the right time so we can comment in an appropriate manner and actually have appropriate input as we should do.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's very little point in us, is what I feel. And you said about the unions getting stuff ahead of the public. The same would apply to scrutiny. We seem to be getting stuff at the same time as the public and as the unions. And it just still feels like we're an afterthought. And I think we need to start, as we mean to go on, as a new authority, with robust, well-timed scrutiny.
I agree entirely, which is what I was commenting earlier, and I agree those comments need to be shared and to go further. I was hoping that Paul had already got note of that and would sort of pass that on to the executive. But, you know, as chair and deputy chair, let's talk about that as well, and we can involve Paul and work out the best way of doing that. Thank you. Exempt items, we have none. Urgent items, we have none. Last item on the agenda, 13, close of meeting. Thank you all very much for such a long meeting. I do apologise for whatever the technical difficulties were, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you, Chairman. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good night. Take care.
Just one point.
Can I just